restroom or anything like that, feel free to just kind of do what you need to do. Thank you all for being here tonight. You're here, you're invited here as a member of one of our school councils. We get together twice a year like this where we call it a Tricouncil meeting. School councils play an important role. School councils really have kind of three main functions: developing school improvement plans, reviewing student handbooks, and providing some input for budget. Okay, and those are pretty much the three roles by statute that the school councils are supposed to help with. So what we're doing here tonight, what we'd like to do tonight, is give you a presentation, and I'll start, and we'll have each building talk a little bit, to give you an overview of our accountability results and the accountability report this year. So if you were on the council last year, you might remember last year we talked a lot about the new MCAS system. And we talked about what those scores meant, and the new reporting categories and all that kind of stuff. But they didn't have a new accountability system in place last year. Last year they used it as a baseline year. So this year, now that they have 2 years of data, they have a new accountability system. So previously you might have heard people say, referring to schools as like a level 2 school, a level 1 school, a level 3 school. They got rid of that designation and they replaced that. So what we'd like to do is spend this time tonight to tell you a little bit of overview of how the new accountability system works. Because as you work on your school improvement plans, or you're making decisions about handbooks and budgets and those types of things, it's important to realize what metrics that we're really kind of being held accountable. Okay? And after I kind of give an overview of the new accountability system, we have each building come up and give a quick highlight of what some of the strengths and areas for improvement in their individual data. Okay, and at the end I'll kind of show you all the data we're referencing tonight in this presentation is available publicly on the DOE website. So for the 2018 accountability system, there's some additional accountability indicators that they've added. So what they say, they determined it, they call it a normative and a criterion reference component. So their normative component is the accountability percentile. So eventually they're going to come up with sort of a score, and then they look at all those scores so it can compare schools. The criterion reference component is progress towards targets. So for each individual category, which you'll see later, whether it's achievement or growth or whatever, they might set a goal, basically your target, and then you're going to score points based on whether you achieve that goal or not. It's also focused on raising the performance of each school's lowest performing students. So when they looked to come up with your accountability number, your accountability percentage, that's based on an average of two groups. One is everyone in the school. So they look at the whole body. The other one is the lowest performing cohort. So half of your score is based on how well your lowest 25% cohort did. Okay? So, yes?
Does that take into account 100% of the student population, or is there anything that's exempt from that?
There are things that can be exempt. Okay, typically what's going to be exempt is, the only one I know right now, so it's a cohort, so they have to have been enrolled in your school the year before. So they have to have taken the test like the year before in your school and then take it again this year. So they're comparing someone who's been in your school system. And I believe certain ELL students are not accounted because there's a separate ELL line, essentially. So they're getting counted additionally too, which we'll see.
So to that end, there was previous data, rumors, et cetera, that Clinton had previously included a percentage that was exempt. So we don't include that in our percentages for MCAS or anything, right? So we do exclude anything that we can exclude, right, from the scores?
Well, these are all, I mean, this is all aggregated by the state.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have to give a test, and then they get it, and then they're the ones that are populated. So there's different accountability indicators that they'll look at. So they're looking at, sorry, let me go back to this one point here. This was a big talking point last year when they were unveiling this. It was the lowest performing cohort. Basically, the way the state explained this was their old accountability system looked at narrowing gaps, right? It was narrowing gaps between subgroups, narrowing gaps. And what they said is, what they were finding was sort of a loophole almost, right? Is there's two ways to narrow a gap. I can either bring the bottom up or I could bring the top down, okay? So by focusing on just the performance of that lowest performing subgroup, they said everyone has a lowest performing subgroup, wherever they are, and we want to make them better. So they tried to almost raise the floor, the baseline. So when they come up with those scores, they look at different accountability indicators: achievement, student growth, high school completion for the high schools, English language proficiency, and some additional indicators including chronic absenteeism and advanced coursework. So achievement is basically your score on the MCAS, right? They're going to look at the average scores. Your student growth is how your students performed similar to other students who had a similar performance, if that makes sense. So they look at your MCAS history. So all the kids have a similar history than you, percentile-wise, did you outperform them or not in your growth? We'll talk more about some of those other ones as we go through. So the weighting of indicators. So each school, depending on its configuration, has these weighted differently. So for example, Clinton Elementary School is going to have 80% of its accountability percentage calculated based on the achievement of students as of last year. That'll change this year. Okay, the reason why? Because when there was only one tested grade in a building, you couldn't get a growth score for that building. Obviously, high school completion is high school only. English language proficiency is looking at the access scores and how well that the ELL students are progressing towards English language proficiency. And then the additional indicator, and the only additional indicator, really they're looking at test participation and chronic absenteeism. Chronic absenteeism is defined as if you miss 10% or more of the days that you're registered. So if you're registered the entire school year, it's 180 days. If you miss 18 days or more, you're considered chronically absent. The thing to note is it doesn't matter why. So if you were hospitalized or whatever, and you were gone for 18 days, even though it's excused, you might have had a tutor, it's still considered lost learning opportunity, so there's a chronic absentee rate there. So at the middle school, it switches a little bit, because now we have a growth, because we can look at how students in fifth grade to sixth grade to seventh grade, we can look at how those students individually grew compared to their like peers. So that cuts that 80% into 60, and the growth is 20. At the high school, the actual ELL subgroup was below the cutoff. So you have to have 20 students who test for a cutoff, and ours was suppressed. Anything less than 20 is suppressed. And the additional indicator here you see is high school completion. So this would have been 10%. That's where this extra 7.5 and this 22.5 or 2.5, excuse me, came from, because they had to reallocate that. High school completion looks at your dropout rate. It also looks at your 5-year graduation rate. And then for additional indicators in the high school, there's also it looks at chronic absenteeism participation. It also looks at advanced coursework. So you look at the percentage of your students completing advanced coursework, and you hit targets based on that.
What do they consider advanced? It's just AP, or is it?
It's more than just AP. There's a whole list, and we actually tried to make sure with Christy that we were coding make sure our courses were coded appropriately, so that, you know, like honors pre-calc might count as advanced or something like that. Okay. I don't know if it does off the top of my head, but I know that's one of the ones that there was some beyond. It's more than just AP. So for the criterion reference components, so when we look at these things like achievement at let's pick the achievement at the middle school, all right? they're gonna say your average score was, 488, and your target is 491. So they wanna see improvement. So when they look at this, you get points for each one of those areas. So if you met that target, you would get 3 out of 4 points. If you exceed the target, you get 4 out of 4. Improved but fell short, so I said 488 if our target was 491 and you got 489, you get 2 points. No change is 1, declined is 0. Okay? So for each of those 6 areas, or for our schools, the ones that they're measured in, they're going to look at each of those indicators, and we'll see that breakdown later, and you're going to get points. And then they're going to tally up those points, come up with the weighted average, and that percentage is basically your accountability percentage. So if you look back at this, 2 out of 4 is 50%, right? 2 out of 4 means you've improved, okay? So it's a little, people see percentages in school and you start thinking like, oh, we want to get an A or something like that, right? But really, 50% or higher means you're improving. 75% or higher mean you've met your targets. Even 25% or higher means there was no change. And less than 25 would mean we actually took a step backwards. So that's where the summary is. 50% or higher indicates the school is improving. 68% of schools statewide, so basically roughly 2 out of 3 schools, were in that 58% or higher category. 25% or lower indicate the school has declined. About 8% of schools statewide fell in that category. So what does that mean? Once they figure out your percentage, so you're going to get a percentage, and they're going to categorize your school into different levels. So this is why I think this is the worst chart the state could have ever come up with, because the old system was 1 through 5, right? So if you're telling me, hey, we got a new system, I'm going to look at it and I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's just the old system with the new name, right? Okay, but it's not. All right. So what happens is it starts right here. There's pretty much 2 buckets right now for this year: 0 to 74 or 75 to 100. So you were either 75 or better, in which case you were meeting targets, or you were 0 to 74, in which case you were partially meeting targets. That's all they did this year. Now next year, there'll be a third one added that will have not meeting. Okay, so there'll be a cutoff. I don't know what the cutoff's going to be, but this won't say 0 to 74. It'll say like 25 to 74 or something like that. And there'll be a third group that's like 0 to 25. So every school gets thrown into one of these 2 buckets. You're either meeting targets or you're not meeting targets. Then, if you require assistance or intervention, you could be classified as one of these. So that means if you're 1 to 10 percentile, so if you're in the 10th percentile or lower, if you have a low graduation rate, low performing subgroups, or low participation, you could be identified as requiring assistance. Then there's broad comprehensive support. These are underperforming schools, chronically underperforming schools. These schools really are kind of your previously identified level 4 and 5 schools. Then there's also, on the other side, schools of recognition. So schools demonstrating high achievement, improvement, or high growth. And those can be, I think there was 30 schools right around there that were recognized as schools of recognition. And some were for, high achievement. Some might have still had low achievement, but they made high growth. So they were, meeting targets or those types of things, meeting their growth targets. All right? So basically, when you look at our report for our school, all you're really going to get is 2 pieces of information. Are you requiring assistance or not requiring assistance? And then are you meeting targets or partially meeting targets? For a district, it's the same idea. Almost virtually the same for districts. But this is significantly different. because if you remember the old system, if you were familiar with it, I don't know if you knew it or didn't know it, but under the old system, districts were classified by the performance of their lowest achieving school. So if you're Worcester and you have 33 schools or whatever they have, whatever the lowest achieving was what your district was. Now they don't do that. They can kind of look at everyone together, look at your district data in the aggregate and come up with the same type of scores. And then obviously same idea, you're either not requiring assistance or requiring assistance. If you require assistance, it's basically because of a low graduation rate or low participation. All right, so this is literally a snapshot, screenshot from the DOE website. So this is our Clinton Public Schools official accountability report. So right here it says overall classification, not requiring assistance or intervention. Okay, so we're not in those bottom two categories. What are we? We are partially meeting targets. Okay, remember there's basically two buckets, partially meeting or meeting. As a district, our progress towards our improvement targets is 47%. So remember 50 was right about where you were switching from kind of no change to improving, okay? There is a needs assistance here, but that's for special education technical assistance, and that's a totally different process. Overall results, so this is what you get. You get a big spreadsheet like this. So up here you can see the different categories. So we have, up here you have achievement, okay, and it says, so there's ELA achievement, math achievement, and science achievement. There's 3 MCAS subjects. So they look at our total district population and they say, well, when we looked at ELA, now there's 4 categories up here. This is for non-high school grades, the 2 on the left. Non-high school grades took the new MCAS, right, the MCAS 2.0, whatever they're calling it. Over here, this is for high schools, because high schools took the old one, the legacy MCAS, as they like to call it. Then the 2 groups are, remember I said it was based on 50%, your whole student population and your lowest performing subgroup, right? So you're all students, lowest performing students. So for grades 3 through 8, you can see that in ELA we got 2 out of 4 as a district, meaning that we improved. Okay, we didn't meet our target. 2 out of 4 for our lowest performing students. In math achievement as a district, we got 0 out of 4. So we declined. Right? Our score was less this year than the previous year. But we got 3 out of 4 for our lowest performing subgroup. So our lowest performing subgroup actually met the improvement target. And science got 1 out of 4, which basically meant no change. So you can see here, what do these points mean? All right, they add them up. 3 divided by 12 is kind of your, it's your percentage, and then they multiply that by the weight, and they do that for each of these categories to come up with your overall percentage. Okay, so our weighted total as a district was 3.2 out of 9.6. So we got 33% of the possible points for grades 3 through 8 in all students. We've got 59% for our lowest subgroup. In the high school, we got 50 and 50. So we got a 40, I can't wait, that says 46, I think, and 50. And then it's weighted 70-30, basically because of our population and number of schools. So we got a 47 overall as partially meeting targets. Okay. So you can look, each of these things are things that they looked at. So for the high school, you can see that 4-year cohort graduation rate, we got a 4 out of 4. We exceeded the target. Extended engagement rate, 3 out of 4. So it was meeting our target. Dropout rate was a 0 out of 4, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's probably the one thing about this system that I don't quite really like yet, is that even though they're calling it criterion referenced, it's all based on your own individual target. So Clinton High School's graduation rate 2 years ago was really, really low, not to steal half their presentation. But, it was really, really low. It wasn't as low the past year, right? It's still way better than the state average. There's still tons of schools across the country, across the state or in the country that would love to have a dropout rate that low, but it actually was less than it was the year before. So, so we got 0 points for that. All right, and then chronic absenteeism here, this is one of the other indicators that they look at. Advanced coursework, we actually got 3 out of 4. We didn't meet our target for improving that. So that's the district-wide results. And then, so we have a similar thing like this for each school. Okay, it walks through. We'll try not to like walk you through every little thing, but we want to point out some highlights. So, Mr. Rule, I don't know if you want to come on up here, and so you can see overall, they're not requiring assistance intervention at the elementary school. The progress toward improvement targets is 65%. Okay, so it's in that improving category. There is no accountability percentile though, because it's in one of those, because of the lack of testing data. And then as a snapshot, here's that same sort of chart to figure out how they came up with that number for the elementary school. So I don't know if you want to start here. Or you
So
want to go to the next slide?
as Steve was saying, we're just a third grade who's testing this year. Next year, obviously, we're going to be grades 3 and 4. So there'll be some other growth. But in English language arts, we earned 2 out of the 4 points. In mathematics achievements, 3 out of the 4. There is no science test for the third grade. And then so you have 5 out of a total 8, the 80% of the weight there. So you figure that out. And then as you go on down, there is no growth for us because, again, there's only one cohort, one group. And your English proficiency was 3 out of 4, which was 10 points. And then chronic absenteeism was 4 out of 4. And so that's an additional indicator. Total of 4.7 out of 7.2, 65%, which is, we're pretty happy about that, although there's places to continue to grow. So our strengths, as we're taking a look at it, and when MCAS comes in, I think the first thing that all administrators do is dive into that to find out what's happening. But here are the areas that we either exceeded, met, or improved in each indicator. We had 6 out of the 7 categories, or 80%, 86% in ELA. And the same thing in the mathematics. In ELA, students of high needs went up by 3.9. And then you have a target was 488.1. Economically disadvantaged went up 4.4. And the students with disabilities went up 6.9. And the students who are of Hispanic or Latino origin went up 3.1. In mathematics, we exceeded in students of economically disadvantaged. Students who are also Hispanic and Latino origin. And you can tell by 4.7 and 6.4. Overall, all students in mathematics met the target, and the target was 489.4 to 491. And then in ELA, we improved but fell below the target, which is what Steve was talking about earlier. So you can improve. We went from 494 to 495.4. And our target was 496, so we missed by 0.6, for meeting the target.
So make one clarification, that when you see through this slide, you might see people referencing all students.
Yeah.
We don't literally mean every single student met the target,
Right.
but there's an all students
students.
group where they look at all your students' average scores. Okay, so that's referring to the subgroup all students. Which is actually everyone.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do kids only go into one category even though they could be, economically disadvantaged, special education students? Are they sometimes even, do we just choose one category for them?
No, they'll be represented in multiple
Okay.
categories. Okay, but
Alright.
that's why they came up with the one category here is called high needs.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So high needs is a way of capturing all of those students.
Okay.
That's where they only count once,
Okay.
right? So they all only count once for that one, and so it's a way of trying to aggregate that data so you can look at your high needs population.
And to that end, you're able to bucket the scores for the whole population and say, hey, the top 10% of these students exceeded in either both or one over the other, and,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
drill down the data there
Yeah,
too.
exactly.
And that's a lot of what we started drilling down even to the question level on
Right.
Friday. We're looking at individual questions and how we scored on that, just to look at the item analysis.
That way you meet their needs too, right?
Well, when we continue, we'll show you there's a reason for that, and that's called the win group and how that's going to play out for us here. In the English proficiency strengths, there's 28 students, current or former students, in there from the ELL program in grade 3. Of those, 96% of the students completed the ELA test, and 96% of the students completed the math. 61% of those students scored partially meeting or meeting expectations, and 79% of the students scored partially meeting or meeting expectations in ELA. All right. The idea behind that is, and there is a ruling in there where all students, if you're in there for your first year, you do not have to take the ELA if you're only 1 year in, but you do have to take the math. Our additional indicators, ours was attendance. So 149 students out of 151 students took ELA MCAS, or 99%. And at the time, there's 152 students in the math when that was in.
This isn't, it's a participation.
Participation, sorry. And that was 99% participation. So that gave you the 4 out of 4. Overall, the students in grade 3 math demonstrated weaknesses in fractions, order of operations, measurement, and data. So Meg really went through all that data to find out where our weaknesses were. And students in grade 3 demonstrated weaknesses in inferencing, theme, pulling details to support main idea, and the main idea of nonfiction stories. How are we going to improve? If we're taking a look at it, 9 students did not meet the math MCAS expectation for the English proficiency area. 5 meet the LA MCAS expectation. A percentage there. The classrooms need to move towards some can-do statements, which we are working with the ELO population and the teachers that are there. And that's, as I said there, note level 1 students in their first year in the United States are exempt from taking the ELA, but all students, whether or not they're in the first year, must take the mathematics. In additional areas, although Clinton scored 4 out of 4 in this accountability category, we're still going to analyze reasons for that chronic absenteeism, as Steve said, 18 days. So why it is. We do have students that leave us for periods of time. Could be some simple as a vacation, could be as simple as the flu, could be as they went on, they've left us to go to another country for a period of time and then they've returned. Any and all those are considered, or, you might have 4 absences in a quarter and you're very close to that 18. So how are we going to change, and what are the improvements, and what has been going on here at your schools? We hired a literacy coach from pre-K to 6. We created a position focused on curriculum instruction pre-K to 6. Those are both well-needed positions for the school district. It's been a long time in coming. Realigned and wrote curriculum maps and ELA and MAP, accounting for the gaps. I think Megan is still working. She continues to work on this, but all summer long, started at the end of the year, working on realigning. Implemented the Eureka Math program, implemented a Read 180 in Systems 44. We implemented what's called Level Literacy Intervention. These are all either intervention programs, or Eureka Math is our program that we're using now in order to work on that group. The schools that you're talking about, focusing in and finding out the needs of those students. We have Do the Math Now program. We hired an additional half-time ESL teacher. Currently there are just over 115 kids in the elementary school. All students have been assessed using the WAPT and the model assessments on the ELL. All ESL students will be taking the Access 2.0 in January. We continue with the math and ELA win block. That's something that Steve brought in last year, and Megan has jumped in on that, scheduling that out. All students receive that extra period, which is an opportunity for intervention for us, or exploratory programs that we offer too. Rolled out foundations of phonics for grade 3. We worked it up from K1, 2, and now in grade 3. In order to help with that, implemented the Lucy Calkins writing program and provided professional development in the area of understanding by design. So there's a lot going on in a year, and actually several years that have been going on. So we're pretty pleased with the direction that we're moving in, but we know that always opportunity for improvement.
So last year we kind of brought in the WIN model in terms of trying to find out what I need now, where we had time during the day where we could focus on interventions or enrichments. But we didn't really have a lot of those interventions or enrichments really there yet. So we kind of were feeling that out. So that's part of a lot of this here, is kind of getting those interventions in place. And I know even for some of the upper grades have already started doing the, or for the grades like 3 and 4, they're doing the enrichments now?
Yes,
Yeah, where students got to actually kind of pick what they wanted
all
to do.
kinds of choices, from becoming an athletic director to what was,
They could be an athletic director, a nutritionist, a journalist, a reporter, digital photographer.
right, yeah,
Those courses, assisting them,
right.
School system is lucky.
So those are the opportunities, we're doing those. If you not have an intervention, then you have an opportunity to do some more exploratory.
All right, so for the middle school, thanks, Rob.
You got,
For the middle school, you know, same idea, we're saying we're not requiring assistance or intervention. We're at 49% partially meeting targets. Remember, 50% or better was when you're improving, 25% or lower than 25 is declining, so we were, I guess, technically in the no change category, but close to the improving category. Now we do have an accountability percentile, which means that when you compare our percentage of progress towards improvement targets to other similar schools across the state, it was the 20th percentile, okay? What these percentiles mean is something I'm still struggling with, and it was part of the feedback that they asked superintendents to provide, because it's providing relative, it's giving you a relative, like a normative measure based on progress towards meeting your own personal improvement targets, right? So it doesn't mean, you know, if my weight loss goal was 10 pounds and someone else was, you know, 5 pounds, I might meet the target, but it still doesn't mean I'm necessarily healthier than you, right? So it's kind of like combining two different things, where they're sort of saying, you know, this is how you meet your targets on your own improvement targets. So if we break down the data, there's a lot more data to look at the middle school than the elementary school. So, Sergeant, I don't know if you want to highlight anything here. Or you want me to go right to your slides?
No, I do want to just bring up the chronic absenteeism, and that's still something I'm struggling with. And I understand that it's 10%, you know, of the 180 days. We did last year have an increase in amount of students that were either hospitalized or, as Rob said, had left for a little while, but they don't necessarily sign them out. You know what I mean? And then when they come back, if they come back, re-register them. So that really bothers me, because I know Mr. Seed and the guidance work very, very hard trying to keep kids in school, as well as I do, and the teachers. So that was very alarming to me, to see that. The thing that I did like, though, if I can see that, is my lowest performing students. What we're starting to do, and I do believe that the wind block has a lot to do with this, and we struggled, I won't lie, last year we struggled getting this up and running. We didn't really know what he wanted it to look like, what we wanted it to look like, how to move students around. And after our first trial and error period, we started to get a little bit better at it. And I think this year we're even doing a little bit more. So we're really targeting in on those students, but more importantly, as you'll see, we have some really great remedial programs coming.
And I guess one thing I forgot to mention too, the lowest performing students, they didn't give it to us last year until very late, but they identified those students for us. So the state says of your 25% that took your test in 2018, your lowest performing students, this is the group we're watching for the next year. Now that group might change if kids move out or whatever, then like the next person might bump in, but it gives you a good sense of, make sure we're on the same page of who those kids are.
So some of the achievement strengths. ELA, the following subgroups had, they did change. So all students, but remember, it's not all of the students, it's the subgroup. They grew. They went from 494 to 495. I know that's not a big jump, but for the middle school 5 grades, for us, it's we're heading in that direction. Our biggest jump, again, is our low performing from 471 to 474 with a 3.3 change. Our African American Black category, they met their target. And that's 28 students being tested. And for us, we're very, very happy.
And if you remember, one of the things that you could get identified for in those 5 bucket areas was for a low-performing subgroup. So they look at every single subgroup like that. So anything that has 20 or more students is a subgroup you're held accountable for.
So testing 5 grades, we have a lot more subgroups. Our lowest performing group in math grew from 463 to 468. That's huge for us because math has always been a struggle at the middle school. That's a 5.0 change. They exceeded their target. 125 students being tested there. Our high needs subgroup improved their target in science. In our economically disadvantaged in EL and former ELL also met their target in science. Again, an area that we've struggled in. In grades 5 and 8 both take the science and tech engineering test. Grade 8 improved 2.6 compared to their skilled score, so I wanted to kind of just show a different way of looking at the achievement. So in 2017, we're at 492.5, but in 2018, 495.1. Our English proficiency, very proud. That group did amazing for us. So they exceeded their target by 20.7. 44 students were tested and did very well compared to some of the other subgroups. Additional indicators. So participation was 97% or higher for students taking the MCAS test. Very happy we did have some grades at 100%, grade 4 ELA, grade 5 science, tech, engineering, 6th grade math, 7th grade ELA and math, 8th grade math, science, tech, and English all at 100%. That's really hard to do. We do get a little neurotic about that, but that used to be a huge piece for us in the old accountability, so we always worked to getting that 100% tested. It was noted that students with disabilities grew from 2017 at 17.2 in 2018. So you want this number to go down?
This is your chronic absence.
Yes, chronic absence. So you want it to go down, and it went down to 16.7, just like the African American and Black met their target. They went from 5.9 down to 3.1. That we want happening, so that looks good. Some areas of improvement. So Friday we did spend a whole afternoon in our little grade level groups by their academic areas, and they really started to dig into the results. You know, what are some areas we need to improve on? What are some things that, you know, we're almost there, and what can we do differently to get there? So in ELA, students showed overall weaknesses in writing and conventions, character development, inferencing, using detail and locating them, then responding to a text, synthesizing ideas from multiple texts, both passages and in poems, and author's craft really seemed to be the biggest target across grades 5, 6, 7, and 8. Math, students showed weaknesses in number sense, fractions, memorized facts, big area of concern. Understanding words in relation to math operations, math vocabulary. Multiple step problems and rate unit rate. And the nice thing is, and I have to thank Ms. Silvio myself, is she looked at this over the summer as the preliminaries. So as Mr. Seed and I do our little learning walks, we did one today, we're seeing modules from the new UBD design being implemented in grades 5 and 6, and this is what we're seeing. So we identified these weaknesses and we're working on them now. We're not waiting till the end of the year. And we know that students are not achieving at a high enough rate, but we are achieving. We're just not meeting the targets that the state has set for us. Student growth areas, overall math growth was below 50. Definitely an area of concern. Although we're showing some growth in different subgroups, we need to show it across the board. One priority is going to be to focus on the growth of the lowest performing grade, which last year was our grade 4. Now we have them as our 5th grade students. So we know what we need to do with them and where to begin. And then ELA, the grade 5, who are now our 6th graders, looking at their tests and where they're weak, we're going to be targeting those areas. English proficiency. So we had many second-year students take the ELA MCAS last year for the first time. They don't take it their first year, but the second year here, they do take it, and we want them to take it. So that's an area that we're going to work with, and I know Ms. Moran's here, and she looked at these results as well. So she has an idea of where she wants to go with her students. We need to have more sheltering of content and content classes to include language objectives, which are those can-do statements, as Mr. Rulo said. And we're finding that we have the language objectives, but just not in a form that is going to help our ELL students. So using our SEI training, which the middle school is 100% SEI endorsed, and using the can-do statements, we're gonna really target in on that. Additional indicators. So chronic absenteeism, here's my little spin again. So that's the 10 days or more. So the middle school went from 11 in 2017 to 11.9 in 2018. And although that might be like 7 or 8 students, that's a lot of students to have lost that many points on. So right now, and like every year, we work with the families, we work with the guidance area to provide supports, write student success plans, have students participate in writing these student success plans to get them to want to come to school, because there's a reason. So we build in incentives into these student success plans. Declines were the highest in the following subgroups. The all students category change was 0.9. Our lowest performing, they changed 1.3. So these are the areas that we kind of grew in. The high needs was 2.6, economically disadvantaged 2.5, and our Hispanic Latino was 2.8. So again, some of these students may have popped up in a couple. What are we doing? So we're doing a lot. As Mr. Rulo said, a lot is happening in 1 year, but the literacy coach also assists grades 5 and 6 teachers, as well as the director of curriculum, she did a workshop this summer with the 5th and 6th grade teachers and started them writing their UBDs. The Lucy Calkins writing program is already in effect and implemented in grades 5 and 6. WIN for the grades 5 to 8. Do the Math Now, we just had training in it, so we have 4 staff trained at the middle school, and I think that will be starting soon.
Soonish.
Soon-ish.
We gotta get some extra, we found out through the training, we gotta get some more kits, but yes.
Okay, Eureka Math Program, we're excited to bring that program in. It's a little challenging, but you know what? We need to get there, and we're going to. Read 180 is already up and running. UBD, as I said, curriculum mapping. It's for all grades. It's already in effect for grades 5 and 6. In December, grades 7 and 8 are going to begin developing their UBD curriculum maps. Continue to work with families, the courts, whatever we have to do to bring that chronic absenteeism down, and continue to send letters home to parents.
Thank you. So for the high school, same thing, not requiring assistance or intervention. Progress towards improvement targets is 43%, partially meeting targets, and the accountability percentile is a 47th percentile. Sort of that snapshot. And this is where you can see these high school completion indicators. You've got some additional indicators at the high school with the 4-year graduation rate, the extended engagement, and the dropout, as well as the advanced coursework.
Okay, we're the last, and heard a lot of numbers. You don't mind if I sing this to you, do you? CHS Achievement Strength. And as Dr. Meyer mentioned, this is a lot of information, and it's really been a whole struggle just to understand it ourselves and to try to keep track of it. But the ELA achievement from 2017 to 2018 was consistent, so we're pretty much on the same level there. Notably, the lowest performing students in ELA achievement exceeded the target. So we did exceed that target, moving from 92.3% last year to 97.9%. which is really a nice jump for us. And the economically disadvantaged and students with disability subgroups met the target with a 6% and 2% increase respectively. And also, which was, when the real focus, because many times that's what you look at and see if the success is there, and it definitely is. All student groups met the target, all student groups met the target in achievement in science. Not a lot of information on science, but and we're also changing that anyways for our MCAS testing for next year. We're jumping from engineering technology MCAS to strictly physics next year. Notably, economically disadvantaged students exceeded the target. So in 2017, achievement was 73%, and in 2018 we improved to 79% for a 4.9 increase. So there's areas of our economically disadvantaged students. All the student subgroups, this is a student growth, all student subgroups exceeded target for the growth in the ELA, including high needs students, our economically disadvantaged students, once again, our students with disabilities, our Hispanic Latino students, and the white students. So all of those subgroups exceeded the target. And although achievement declined in math, no excuse for that. It did decline from 2017 to 2018 for all student subgroups. There was an overall growth which improved and met the target, and this includes the groups of the high needs, the economically disadvantaged, our Latino students, and our white students. So there was a lot of success there too, so that's good. The high school completion strength, and this is the only area that has to really worry about this, is the high school. And the CHS earned 3 out of a possible 4 points. Dr. Meyer showed you that point system, which an intended extended engagement reflects the number of students who graduate in 5 years or less. And most of these were, in most cases, not exceeding 4 years. So all students met the target of 1.8% increase with a 95.3 rate in 2015, 97.1 rate in 16. The high needs subgroup improved, so these are from 93% to 95%, and the economically disadvantaged improved from 92% to 95% in the same time frame. So our poor kids, they graduate from high school.
So just one thing, just to note, the years here, there's always kind of a lag on this, because first of all, it's a five-year engagement rate that they're looking at, but also that graduation rate and those extended engagement rates, they can't really calculate that data until the following years. They see if they pop up or not. So
yeah, and we don't really have many 5-year students. That's kind of the number isn't there, but there's very, 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 very few. All students exceeded the target, the 4-year cohort graduation rate, improving from 93% in 2016 to 96.9%, 97% in 2017. In the same time frame, economically disadvantaged students improved 9.9%, from an 88% to 98%. And high need students improved from an 89% to a 97% too. So again, our students, the heck with the points. Just round them out. Like I talk to the bookie. There's the additional indicator strengths, which I think a question came up too, what classes those were. So the advanced, at the high school we have different levels of college prep, and we have honors and AP, and we also have areas of online courses and some college courses offered to students. So all of these would come into play. So the advanced coursework is defined by any student in grade 11 or 12 taking an advanced placement, a dual enrollment, or other rigorous math or science class. All students improved, but below target. They improved. In 2017, our rate was 40.1%. In 2018, 44.2%. This is a 4.1 increase, but our target was set at 46.2%. So I think that was the area that we improved, or under the,
Just fell short.
yeah, it just fell short. But obviously, as you can see, we improved. Chronic absenteeism is another factor in this area. No change was reported for all students from our 2017 to 18 data. The high needs subgroup, though, it improved, but was still below target from 28% to 27%. So it improved, we got better, but it's still not at the point where we wanted to see it. And notably, our Hispanic Latino groups exceeded the target with a 7.9 improvement from a 25.4% to 17.5% rate. So working hard at that, and it's nice to have an improvement in that area. Achievement areas for improvement. In the area of math, students showed overall weaknesses in the following areas: interpreting line plots to extract data, such as medians, writing equations, arithmetic sequences, and use of special triangle ratios to solve both the 30, 60, 90, and 45, 90 triangles. I wrote that down, I don't really know a lot about it.
You would.
Yeah, guess who had an influence on that? In the area of English, students show weaknesses in the craft and structure and integrating knowledge in the ideas, namely in the area of fiction, and that's the truth. And in science, students require more work with open response work to compile their thoughts and experiences to write a coherent response to a question. So these are areas for improvement. One priority would be to continue to focus on the growth of the lowest performing subgroup in the area of math, because they fell below the target. No hiding anything, that's what it was, and that's what it is, and that's what we need to work on. All other subgroups met targets, which was really nice. So we continue our commitment to excellence at ELA and maintain that significant growth we have seen in the math this year. So there has been some, just got to keep working on that. Completion areas for improvement. Our dropout rate, it's funny when it's just, when you're talking about a dropout rate and one student, we lose one student, which we never want to do. That really has, the small was 450 students, and if you lose one person, that's a big percentage. So it has always been a dropout rate was 0.5%, 2 out of 434 students. That's really impressive. That was in 2016. And in 2017, our dropout rate was 1.1. So you have five students out of 437. And because of this increase, we did not meet the target or earn points. And every single student that we lose is a severe loss to us. And every single student that we've lost, we have spent time and visits to homes and parent conferences, and that each teacher taking his or her time to work with that student. And though 5 students seems very minimal, and it is, but it's 5 students. It's 5 people's lives that we feel that we and we just always, we follow up, we give them opportunities, and we keep in touch. However, in the students with disability subgroup, that dropout rate in 2016 was 1.2, and in 2017 was 1.1. So, it's hard work. There are numbers up there, but there are people in the building working with our kids. Our student support teams, which was once called the At-Risk, we meet twice monthly to be proactive and address concerns about students brought forward by the staff. And when you're in this building, again, of 435, 450 students, and you have 40 or 50 staff members, they're the ones, the teachers in the front, in the front line, so to speak, working with these students, knowing their strengths, knowing their weaknesses, knowing when they're hurting, and knowing when they need to intervene and be proactive. And that's why that dropout rate is low, is because all our staff are doing more than just teaching students. They're reaching out and caring for them on a daily basis. We have an alternative school, which has been a dream for a long time. It's just started. We have about 6, 7 students right now on a given day.
We have 4 official right now.
Yeah. We have a couple of babies left on the doorstep, and we're gonna take them in, and we just did a school.
As a matter of one, one of those 4 students would actually count as a re-enrolled
Yeah.
dropout. So someone that was one of those, would have been one of those 5 last year that's now
Yeah.
back in school.
And there's things like that that don't show up on this. For instance, if we had a dropout in 2015 or 2016, and this has happened, he or she comes back to us in 2017, people in their right mind are gonna say, no, you already did it, but we're not in our right mind. Seriously, we welcome them back. I mean, I've had students who have dropped out twice, but you know something, I'd rather have a number like that than not give him or her another try. Christie? Oh, you're our bookkeeper.
Speaking from experience this week, these two are a couple of bulldogs when it comes to our dropout rate. This week alone, phone calls were made to schools, and I can tell you that 3 of those students are re-enrolled now. They didn't meet the cutoff of October 1st, so they don't count towards stuff. So they make a point, they follow up, they track those kids. So it's not they're gone and we forget about them.
Town's too small to hide from us.
These two don't let up.
I had a
They
kid
make
down at-
sure those
I had a
kids
kid
are
down
going.
at Rite Aid one night, yeah, I'm coming tomorrow, I'm coming to you home days. And I used some, with the school survey, we just did this the other day, on, safety of the school, comfort level in the school, some nice stats just came back, we just did it this past Friday, so, those are some of the things that happened. Like I said, I wanna repeat it, there's something that'll never show up on those numbers, and that's the way our teachers work directly with kids each and every day. Additional indicator areas for improvement, the chronic absenteeism, any student with 10 or more absences, an area of concern is the area. We have a team of staff members who work with students and families when the need arises. Nothing to get a phone call from someone up in the second floor in a math department say, hey, where's so-and-so? He or she's been out now 2 or 3 days in a row. Overall, there's no change was reported for students in this area, but in 2017, 20.9 students were reported in the category, and 2018, 21.3%. Declines reported in the lowest performing, the declining rate, and economically disadvantaged students, and students with disabilities in white subgroups. Students taking advanced course declined in 4 subgroups: the high needs, the economically disadvantaged, the students with disabilities, and Hispanic and Latinos. So on that, we have talked about opening the criteria on that too, but that's a whole other story, because it's been very rigorous and kind of demanding criteria, but we don't want to keep people out if they really want to work at something like that. Changes for improvement, review of the program of studies. That's our booklet with all our courses and curriculum. Looking at it again, we're working on college dual enrollment. I've met with Quincy a few times on this. College credit coursework, which we have. The new engineering program, which I mentioned, which we're leaving the engineering design as an MCAS course, so to speak, but we're going to bring about a new course in the engineering field. Horticultural program is something new up in the science department, and the robotics program for students, we've talked about that. It's been a program here for over 25 years. We're talking now about making it credit for that and academic responsibility. Department heads are always working on the depth of data analysis for MCAS scores, curriculum revision, including vertical alignment with the high school and CMS. We have some courses we offer for the 8th graders over here, but we want to continue looking at that. Continuation of the EL program, our students, and specifically with math and science, we have an ELL teacher who leads the traditional class of his own, and he works in the science and the math classes with some of our ELL students. And that's something that we just started last year. We're already seeing some success in that area. And become familiar with the 2019 MCAS format to use paired reading and emphasize close reading. And that's it.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. So just a couple final thoughts. This is right, most of my slides were stolen from the DESE's presentation, and I just kind of added our specific thing. So from their presentation, it says, Do not compare the 2018 accountability data to historical accountability results, because a lot of those things, as we explained, like now it's more of a percentage towards your improvement targets, so it's gonna be the different, you can't really compare the same percentages to other percentages, because it's not the same, it's based on totally different stuff. And do not equate 2018 accountability categories with historical accountability and assistance levels. So like I said, you know, when you have that, you see 5 buckets, don't say, oh, that's a 1, that's a 5, and it's the same stuff with new names. It's not, it's totally different the way they're doing that. So that's just something they're trying to really emphasize. You know, internally, we will use all this information, improve our curriculum mapping, provide interventions, guide improvement efforts. And I think that the key is, and something that I want us to take away from this group, and the point of listening to these type of presentations, is we always want to be improving, okay? So we always need to be looking at how can we get better. And I think that's part of, as the school councils, looking at the school improvement plans, the the budgets, the handbooks, those types of things. How are ways that we can improve and try to get better? And as administrators and teachers, we're always looking at that same thing. So I think that's all I had. I've got to either start this meeting earlier. This is my second year in a row that I've like run right up. I got to start this meeting earlier, or I got to learn to talk faster. Does anyone have any final questions or comments? Okay, one last thing I was going to show you, in case you have questions. We threw a bunch of stuff up there. All these things, all this data, you can go to the school and district profiles on the DOE webpage. And you can go to accountability for a school, and you can see all of this stuff. So I literally, those charts that were there, I literally took a screenshot of these things right from there, and it's all public. So you can go look at this if you want to look at it, if you need to look at it in one of your meetings. You can even break it down a little further by, you know, I can pick specific subgroups I want to look at. I can get the detailed data for each indicator. The detailed data gives you a little more in terms of those achievement numbers they were highlighting, number of kids that took the test, all that kind of stuff. So you can drill down this, and as I mentioned, we can drill down even more once we get to the confidential data. So we can keep going. Yep.
So I know it's a hard question to ask because of the comparison or lack of ability to really compare, but you kind of haven't given your opinion, but are you pleased? Are you okay with the data? I mean, I know there's always room for continuous improvement, but in terms of meeting your expectations with the data and the new, you know, how do you feel about the data? And same question for you all in the back. How are you feeling as leaders of the district about the data?
I think it's sort of in a summary type statement. I think a lot of our, I think ELA, we did a lot, we seem to do better across, in a broad stroke there. I think in math, clearly it shows that we have some work to do, okay? I feel pretty comfortable because I don't feel like there was a ton of surprises on these things, and I think these are things that we were anticipating, and those are why that we took steps over the summer to start looking at aligning the math curriculum and doing curriculum maps and doing that kind of stuff. And I think it sort of validates a lot of that work when we can look at historical data and say, yeah, fractions has been a big problem, and then you look at this and you go, yeah, fractions was a problem, but over the summer, we think we're starting to fix the fraction problem, because we've looked at it in the map. So I think what I feel good about is I feel that even though maybe we didn't see the improvement or the scores that we would wanted to see last year, I think we have a lot of stuff in place and a lot of stuff going on that as long as we can, contain ourselves and make it through the year, that we'll be able to, I think we should see some improvement next year. So, any other questions? I also think there's going to be even more changes to the system based on the survey I received from the superintendents and some of the feedback they're getting.
Well, it's Massachusetts. They're going to change every X amount of years anyway.
I'd like to say at one point it'd be nice if they actually kept the same set of standards like 12 years so a kid could actually go to school and learn the same thing. So anyway, So we have our school committee meeting in about 10 minutes or so, but if you guys want to take some time, a few minutes in your school councils, if you need to, talk about it, if you got to prep for your next meeting or anything like that. I appreciate you coming out tonight. Hopefully this helped with something. If it made you more confused, feel free to reach out to me. And, we'll talk to you later. Thank you.